So what happens when you're out looking at houses, you find the house that checks all the right boxes, you're really excited, you're working with your agent, you have your pre-approval ready, and you find out that there are 5, 6, 7, maybe even 10 offers on that house. How do you position yourself the best possible way to make sure you have the absolute best chance of getting that house at the end of the day? Well, I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to give you 5 strategies that I use with my clients, and I hope that they help you out in your situation as well. My name's David Moyer. I'm a realtor here in Dayton, Ohio, and I'm excited to dive into this topic. One of the first things that I tell all of my buyers when we get into a multiple offer situation and they have found the home finally that they love is that we are going to write a clean contract. And what is a clean contract? A clean contract essentially has the terms of the contract that the buyer is willing to offer, but it leaves off a lot of the excess. It trims the fat essentially of the contract. You're not making any unusual requests, you're not throwing the seller for a loop, and you're making sure that the seller, when they look at your contract compared to everybody else's, they can easily read that contract, they can easily see all the terms, and they can easily calculate what their net is going to be. Now, just because we're doing this doesn't mean that we're representing the seller or giving the seller everything they possibly want. It just means that we're making it that much easier for the seller to want to work with us and not have all the excess terms that they may have to overcome. You never know what someone else has written into their offer as well, so making sure you have a clean contract is really going to go a long way. Now, the second thing that a lot of my buyers will consider when getting into a multiple offer situation is something that became increasingly popular back in 2020 and 2021 when the market really took off and sellers were seeing multiple offers on their properties, and that's called an escalation clause. An escalation clause essentially says, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, here is our offer on your property. In the event somebody else beats our offer, we are willing to automatically increase our offer XYZ to beat that other offer. And here is the cap in which we are willing to go up to. So here's an example. Let's say you're looking at a property listed for $300,000 and you want to include an escalation clause. You're essentially willing to pay, let's say, $320,000. We would say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, here is our offer of $300,000, but we are willing to beat any other offer that comes in by $2,000 if you can show us that the other offer did in fact beat us. So if you write that offer and they receive a second offer in a multiple offer situation and somebody else offered $305 with no escalation clause, my client's contract would automatically be bumped up to $307, beating that other offer by $2,000. And then what happens? The seller will essentially counter at that $307 price. They will provide us with proof that they had another offer that justified the increase and the escalation clause, and then my buyers would sign off on that, and boom, they've got the house. Now, this doesn't work in all situations. There are some sellers that don't want to see the escalation clause, they just want to see what's called a highest and best. So make sure that your agent is communicating with that listing agent to find out if the seller is willing to look at an escalation clause. They are really, really great tools. And also, pro tip, if your escalation clause only beats another contract by $1,000, $500, that may not be worth the seller's time, even if your escalation clause nets them a little bit more, because they may have better terms or a different type of financing they prefer on the other end with another buyer. So make sure that your escalation clause is worthwhile. Now, this next tactic to help you secure the property in a multiple offer situation is what I call an inspection cap. And this is a really, really useful tool that a lot of my buyers have found to be extremely successful when they're in situations like this. And I want you to pay attention really carefully. We saw a lot of buyers between 2020 and 2024 writing in that they were waiving their inspections. And I will tell you, as a licensed realtor here in Ohio, I do not encourage my buyers to waive inspections whatsoever. The risk involved with doing that getting into a home and finding out there was something of high dollar that maybe the seller was unaware of that you could have found during the inspection period is really, really high. So here's what I consider. Based on the purchase price, based off the condition of the house, you will say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I'm going to do an inspection. I'm not only going to make that inspection period fast, I'm not going to draw it out over the course of 10 to 14 days, but I'm going to do it almost immediately. And in that inspection, I'm not going to ask for any sort of repairs unless it's a high dollar item that goes up into the, let's say, thousands of dollars. And even then, I'm going to tell you there's no way I'm going to exceed a maximum amount of XYZ. So here's an example. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, here is my offer from my clients. They are going to do a fast inspection and they are going to cap their inspection defect notice request, should they find anything, at $2,500, let's say. That tells the seller, worst case scenario, these buyers are not going to ask for more than $2,500 in repairs should they come across something like that. Now, keep in mind, the buyer still has the ability that if they come across a huge defect, something that's going to cost $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 to repair, they can still go back to that seller and say, this is far beyond anything we ever expected, and we need to negotiate this, or they can walk from the house depending on the circumstances. So putting that inspection cap in there not only tells the seller that you are a very reasonable buyer, you're not going to be nickeling and diming them for handyman things, but you're also going to cap any request that you have. So it's a win-win for both parties, and trust me, it's much better than waiving those inspections. Now, this next item may not work for all buyers out there, and I have this discussion with my clients during their initial consultation if they're looking in an area or a price point that I know the likelihood of a multiple offer situation is probably pretty high, and that is what's called an appraisal gap. An appraisal gap essentially says if you're buying the property for X number of dollars and for some reason that appraiser comes in and says the property actually appraised for this much less than your contract price, that there is a set amount that you're willing to go over that appraised value. So here's an example. Let's say you go into multiple offers on a home that's listed for $275,000. At the end of the day, your contract is actually for $285,000, but you have put in there a $10,000 appraisal gap. So if the appraiser were to come back and say, I see that this was $285,000, I understand it was multiple offers, but my appraisal is $275,000. Then essentially the seller would know that you're still going to buy that property for $285,000. Now, what does that mean on the back end for you as the buyer? It means that in addition to whatever that down payment is that you were already bringing to closing, you are bringing an additional $10,000 to closing to cover that appraisal gap. So the reason I have this discussion in advance is obviously this is not going to be a tool that a buyer is going to use if their down payment maxes out their contributions and what they're able to bring to closing. But if you have the resources, if the home goes into multiple offers, and if the home goes well above asking price, this is a great tool to have in your back pocket that reassures a seller that even in the event that it underappraises, we are willing to make up the difference. Now, it doesn't have to be a complete difference. Let's say that property you bought for $375,000 escalated all the way up to $400,000, and you have that $10,000 gap, and then the home ends up appraising for the original $375,000. As the buyer, you're still only obligated to the $385,000, not the full contract amount, and the seller will know that in advance as well. And this last bit of advice falls more into the counseling side of what I do for a living as a licensed real estate agent in Ohio, and that is having the heart-to-heart talk with my buyers, that when we are piecing together all the different puzzle pieces for their offer in a multiple offer situation, at the end of the day, I tell them to structure their offer in such a way that if another buyer were to beat them out by a small amount, even $5,000, that they are not going to have any regrets. They're not going to kick themselves going, I wish we had done that extra $5,000. I wish we had done this. So putting your best foot forward is going to help. You only have one chance when it comes to these multiple offer situations. Very rarely do we see a seller go back to everyone and say, try again. Bring us your best and final. A lot of times, if you know about a multiple offer situation in advance, you have one shot. So make sure there are no regrets. And that means if I call you up at the end of the day after we've submitted our offer, and if for some reason they did go with another offer, you are still going to be okay because you put your best foot forward. You did everything that you could. We followed all the steps that I've already talked about. And if at the end of the day, somebody else still beats you out, perhaps that home is just not meant for you. Things always happen for a reason. That's one of the things I love about this business. If you don't work out on this home after putting your best foot forward, 100% of the time, I guarantee you, my clients will find something else and completely forget about that situation. And that's it. Those are some of my suggestions. I do have a couple other things I do with my buyers on a case-by-case basis. I go over all those during a buyer's consultation, depending on your circumstances and depending on the type of home that you're looking for. So keep in mind, the market is still really tight out there. Even in a normal market, it is still possible to get involved in multiple offer situations. So having a plan in advance when you go out there and find that home is going to save you time and save you money and help you get into that property at the end of the day. So, thanks for joining me. Once again, I'm David Moyer, licensed real estate agent here in Dayton, Ohio. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, do all the things. I drop these videos once a week with some helpful tips and some things you may not know about the greater Dayton area, and I would love to hear from you, so make sure you comment. I do my absolute best to reply to any comments that come across there, and I look forward to having you with me again really soon.